Thank you so much for spending a few minutes just chatting with me. It's always a delight to meet people like yourself that are involved in the space industry. And just tell me a little bit about your background and particularly how you got involved in space.
Yeah, I've been interested in space my whole life. I got a chance to go to the National Air and Space Museum as a young child and was really inspired by seeing all the Apollo hardware at the Bell X-1 that Chuck Yeager broke the speed record in. When I was just graduating college, the Mars Society was getting started in 1998, and I joined as a volunteer. And it's been a fantastic adventure for me to be part of the Mars Society. And I'm now the executive director this year, started in January, but I've had many different roles over the years with the Mars Society, just been able to meet a lot of great people and talk to folks about humans to Mars and the human future. And so it's been very rewarding for me.
So were you like a sci-fi nerd when you were a kid?
Yeah, that's fair to say. I watched a lot of Star Wars and Star Trek, and I played role playing games and I played video games in a small town in Ohio. So I was not like other kids, but definitely was always interested in space and always trying to figure out what I could do to push things forward.
That's a really interesting comment there that I'm intrigued about. The fact that in your younger days, you were interested in space, but canon that you knew were not particularly interested in space. Do you think that's
Mhm.
changed much yet? Are more of the younger generation interested in space or much the same as it was?
I definitely think that there's more people interested in space, but I feel like we still have a very long way to go because it's not universal that kids are thinking about a positive future if they grow up and learn their math and science, that they could actually be part of pioneering Mars or going back to the moon or just being a spacefaring society. I think we still have a ways to go, but absolutely, I think movies like The Martian and the book The Martian and other science-based entertainment that's come out, like The Expanse, that's really helps people understand, educate them on what's realistic and what's sci-fi. When I was little, humans to Mars was a sci-fi concept. It wasn't going to happen in our lifetimes. It was 50 to 100 years away. And now it's so close. Now it's basically going to happen within 10 years if you believe that SpaceX is going to be able to finish their Starship and build a city on Mars, which is their goal. It's definitely more realistic now, and so I think more people are aware of it and more people are excited about it. But it's still a segment of our population, not the
I
majority.
think there's a reasonable chance that some of my grandchildren may end up living in space. And when you just extend the time horizons a little bit, you go, oh, yeah, okay, so this is close family members that could actually go in space. It changes the paradigm a little bit to just think a little bit further ahead as the human longevity increases, which is quite cool.
I wouldn't even wait that long. I want to retire on Mars myself. I want to go myself, and I think there's going to be opportunities for folks in the next 10 to 15 years to do things like that. And so it's coming a lot faster than I think you realize.
Clearly, you just answered my next question, which is, do you expect to get to space or do you want to go to space? And your answer is yes. Interesting.
Yeah,
Is that
I've always wanted to go to space. When I was a teenager, I wanted to join the Air Force, but I kept growing and I'm 6'9". And so as soon as I passed 6'5", I knew my future of being a fighter pilot is not going to materialize. But I've always wanted to become an astronaut. I went into a career in software development and kept volunteering at the Mars Society. And now we have a program called the Mars Desert Research Station where we have an analog astronaut program. And so I've been part of that. I've been on a crew and I'm going to command a crew later this year, next year rather, at our station. So I'm kind of getting to live some of those childhood dreams in a way. But yeah, absolutely. I would go to space.
tell me a little bit about more about the Mars Society and kind of what the objectives are. You mentioned the analog research. What else is the Mars Society involved in?
We're the world's largest nonprofit that's focused on humans to Mars. And so we have a program of research that we do. Started in the year 2000. We built a station in the Arctic in Canada, and then we built a second station in the southern Utah desert. And that second one has been extremely successful for us. We've had over 1,500 people go through the station, over 280 crews. Two of our crew members have reached space. Jessica Watkins is on the ISS right now, and Cyan Proctor went to space last year. So they've both been through our program. That's the major thing we do, but we also have chapters around the world that put on different events. Here in Seattle, we have a set of events we do where we show a virtual reality version of our station in Utah and talk to people about space and humans to Mars. And we also have our annual conference that'll be at Arizona State University this year in October. And that'll be basically a who's who of prominent speakers that are working on humans to Mars and folks that work at NASA, folks from industry, academia. So we've been doing that conference for 25 years now. And all of the sessions for the last 10 years are up on YouTube. So we have quite a library of content of people talking about all the different aspects of humans to Mars.
And out of interest, why Mars? What's the thing that about Mars that attracts you and attracts the people in the society?
That's a great question. There's a lot of things we could spend money on. Why spend money on space? Why try to go to Mars of all places? There's really three reasons. The first reason is for the science. The biggest question in science is there life in the universe? And we actually have it in our power to answer that question. If we go to Mars and we drill for water, there could very well be microbial life there now. And Mars was also once a warm and wet planet, just like the Earth. And so there could have been life then as well that we could find fossils of. Some of the oldest fossils on Earth are called stromatolites, and they're basically fossilized cyanobacteria from about 4 billion years ago. We could find the same thing on Mars, and that would prove that life existed there. And if we find that there was life on Mars, we can compare it with life on Earth and look for similarities and differences. And that could inform a whole branch of discovery. Another reason to go to Mars is for the challenge of it. The Apollo program inspired a lot of people in the 60s. A lot of people saw the astronauts land on the moon and ended up going into science-based careers or became teachers or doctors. So it generated all this intellectual capital that dwarfed the cost of the program. And we think that a Humans to Mars program would be the same. It would tell every kid in school, study your science and math because you can go do this. And then the third reason is for the future. It's just like you alluded to. Eventually, we're going to go out to space. We're either going to never leave Earth and die on Earth someday as humanity. And that's a sad dystopian future that I don't believe in. Or we're going to be a spacefaring society. We're going to go out into the solar system and beyond. And I say, let's get started.
And Mars is by far the best option as a destination.
It is. Mars has everything you need for not only living on Mars as a human being, but also to build a whole civilization there. It's got natural gravity. It's got water, ice that you can easily turn into oxygen and water to drink, and also methane for rocket fuel. It's also got all the other elements you would need to build things like plastics and electronics. You could build structures using 3D printing techniques. And so Mars has everything you need to build a whole branch of human civilization. Unlike the moon, even though the moon is a lot closer and a lot easier to get to, it's drier and there's a lot less resources there. And so the moon's so dry that if there were concrete on the moon, you would mine it to get the water out. That's how dry the moon is. Whereas there's the surface of Mars underneath, just below the surface and on the polar ice caps.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's fascinating to reflect back as well. Because let's say in the next 50, maybe 100-year time frame. So we're looking at a probable colony on Mars, 100, 200, 300 people, maybe 1,000 people. That's what I think. Maybe you can correct me and there'll be more. It still leaves 8 billion, 10 billion people back on Earth. And it's the advantages and the benefits that the people on Earth will get from those people going to Mars, the technological advancements, which are just outstanding. And that, to me, that's a really interesting kind of perspective to look at the investment we're putting in. What does it do for the rest of us left on Earth? What does the Mars Society have any Earth application kind of programs baked into it?
There's a lot of things about developing space that have dual uses back here on Earth. Things like if you were able to build power generation technologies that are compact nuclear reactors or compact and things like that you could use on Mars that would have applications back on Earth. There are ways to create water and use desalination and grow plants that also would all have practical applications here on Earth. There was a report recently done last year that said that every dollar spent for NASA, that there was a larger benefit to the U.S. economy based on all the breakthroughs and all the subsidiary dollars that are spent. around space than the actual cost of the funds allocated for NASA. So space is a good investment overall because it develops technology and it develops new capabilities and it trains people new skills. So there's all kinds of different benefits. But yeah, in your scenario, if we had a million or 1,000 person base on Mars, just imagine the types of technology that would have been developed for that base, and also all of the discoveries and intellectual inventions that they would create on Mars would benefit everyone back on Earth. And that's, some people think that might be what the economy of Mars ultimately
Hmm.
is that it exports inventions and it exports intellectual property because they're living on the frontier. The future colonists are living on the frontier, having to solve life or death problems all the time. And so that's going to generate a lot of innovation by necessity.
And going back to my time frame kind of argument, there's yeah, it's not. I'm not the first person to say. I'm repeating what others have said of the analogy. And the first Europeans going across the ocean to something they didn't know what, discovering North America, and it not very long afterwards. 250 years is a very short time frame given the longevity that we might get to, and the whole of North America and all the
Right.
technology and all that is fed back to Europe. Clearly, at some
Right.
point, it became completely self-sustaining on its own. But it's just that scope of opportunity which space offers to Earth is an
Mhm.
analogy. The scope of opportunity that
Yeah, there's abundance in space. We just need to harness. Europeans did in the 14th, 15th, 16th century. They opened up the new world, the new frontier, and it benefited everyone in your own ways. Wasn't always great for the inhabitants, but we don't have that problem on Mars. Hopefully, there's not, you know, bipedal creatures that we're gonna find. If we do find life, that's most likely might it'll be easy to understand. But Mars represents a new frontier that we can go exploit and benefit and bring those benefits back to people on Earth. And another reason that I didn't mention studying Mars and studying some of the other planets and our moons in their solar system is to understand the Earth better. Venus has a runaway greenhouse effect. Mars was once warm and wet like the Earth, but lost its magnetic field happen. And if we understand that better, then that we can understand how the systems of the Earth work and combat climate change, mitigate climate change, things like that.
I know that you're also interested in VR and the VR experience and bringing that as an educational tool to people.
We are about 5 years ago. We've built a digital twin of our station in Utah, and we have it available for download for anyone on the Steam video game platform, also on our website, marsvr.com. And what we've done is we wanted to make not only a research tool so that our researchers could learn what the facility in Utah is like and how to use some of the aspects of it, but also just a public outreach tool. Like I can hand a VR headset to a kid in an event and they can put it on, they can walk on Mars for 5 or 10 minutes. I've had the opportunity to show hundreds of kids that experience and they universally get excited and inspired by the possibility of being able to go to Mars. So it's been very rewarding, not just to work on the VR project, but to see people use it in science, what we wanted them to experience, which is walking on the genesis of that VR project was I got to do that at JPL. I got to walk around where the custody river was in VR and use the same tools that the science team uses to analyze rocks with using Microsoft HoloLens goggles to analyze the landing site of Curiosity. And I took those off when I was in the JPL ops lab and I said, wow, this is amazing. More people should get to see this. And so we basically started a VR project to do that, to bring Mars to the general public.
Have you used VR for one of your conferences?
We did something similar at our last conference. It was a virtual event and it was over Zoom primarily, but we did have a VR experience that people could log into through AltSpace VR from Microsoft, and they could actually be in a room with other people interacting with them. But then the conference talks were on a big video screen in that VR room, and there was a microphone. You could walk up to it and ask a question. And we actually had it connected to the Zoom call so that the whole VR room was a Zoom attendee on the call. So I had people that looked like cartoons that were avatars in VR asking questions to the NASA's deputy administrator and some of the other NASA scientists and folks that work on the rovers. And it was a lot of fun, but I could definitely see the possibility of us having a fully immersive Mars, like metaverse experience where you log in and you can go all these different places on Mars where the rovers are now, some of the sites they visited, but also future human colony designs, walking around in some of the concepts that our members and we've had a series of competitions to design things like that. A lot of that could be put into VR so people could experience what the future Mars settlements will be like. So yeah, that's absolutely something we want to work on, and we're actively looking for partners to help out with that.
Can I try that out on my Oculus?
Yeah. Yeah, you can try out Mars VR on that Oculus right now. You should be able to do that. VR.com.
What next?
We're very focused on how Starship is doing down in Boca Chica, Texas. They're about to launch their orbital test flight, and there was a little bit of a delay with the FAA certifying them, and we got involved with that. We sent a letter in to the FAA and some of the other government agencies to try to help that along. So we're really excited to see that's about to happen. And I've got the Starship model right behind me. Starship is going to be a huge breakthrough. Starship is really going to enable a lot of the things we've been talking about on this call. And so when you have a fully fueled Starship in Earth orbit, it can send 100 people to anywhere in the solar system. And that's a breakthrough technology. It could also send a heavy lift amount of cargo anywhere in the solar system. So once we get Starship flying, we're really going to see the future happen quickly. And quite frankly, I don't think we're ready for the utilization of Starship. We're not ready. There's a lot of companies that are yet to be founded that are going to go work on lunar surface and Mars surface hardware that's going to fly on Starship, because that's going to be needed very quickly once things are going. And so that's, I think, the biggest thing that we're excited about. We also, at the Mars Society, we're doing a high school summer program this summer, which is really exciting. We've had a bunch of different lecturers talk to our students, and we're teaching them marrying in a different way. We're the normal high school curriculum. We're actually going to give them the ability to design their own Mars mission on their own. And so the students are working on that right now. They've had 2 weeks of guest lectures from various prominent experts in the field. And now they're going to work on a Mars surface landing mission and present that in a couple of weeks to our judges, and we're going to judge them. And they're all going to get a certificate of participation that they were in the Mars Society's summer mission to Mars program. But there's going to be one team that wins, and that's going to look really good on a college transcript or a college application. So anyway, that's a new thing we're doing at this educational program, and we want to do more things like that in the future as well.